Hello.
Hello. I just realized I have on the same blouse that's in that intro.
Oh, for heaven's sakes. I hadn't paid attention. I figured I'd see my, I try to
Everyone
change
else turned this way, everyone else turned that way, but it was one of those.
But your hair was different, and that's what I was noticing.
Yeah, back then my hair was short. That's right. It's been 2 weeks since you've seen me. Hi, Louise. Nice to have you. Yay!
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you, Deborah. You are awesome. Thank you for being here. Once again.
Yeah. Well, Yeah. God, that was last week. Yeah. I can't keep it straight.
You know what? That might be a topic for the show too. Start writing down when we're losing our senses of time lately. Because people can definitely comment on that in the chat. That'd be another topic to consider. How time is speeding up, slowing down, skipping over, deja vu, repeating, time lost, leaping forward, all kinds of stuff. Time
is relevant.
Time, yeah. What is time? We can even talk about that. What is time? So that's a potential conversation for the future. Yay! So welcome everybody. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, we usually kind of chit chat for just a couple minutes till people get in. I want to talk for just a minute, or have you talk just a minute, about Mercury being in retrograde. Because it is driving me crazy. And I knew it. I mean, I hadn't looked at the calendar or anything, and a couple days ago, I made the comment, and I said, it's Mercury in retrograde! It's like,
okay, if you can get online tonight and see us on YouTube or Facebook, congratulations. Mercury, you're doing good. Please let us know. Where are you? There you are. Comment down below or beside us in the chat and let us know if you're having a barrel of monkeys with this Mercury retrograde that's been going on for several days, I think now. Like maybe 2, 3, 4, maybe longer. And somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think also Saturn and or Jupiter are also in retrograde.
It started May 29th, yes.
Okay, so that would be 3 days ago. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Feel free to tell us what crashed on you, and like for me, our computer and our internet keeps going down, but sporadically. Cell phone is going nuts. But Iris, can you explain a little bit about what the term retrograde means?
What it means is it's because of our juxtaposition. Hello, Randy. Our juxtaposition in the solar system. We're going around in one direction, and pretty much everybody else is. But to us, because Mercury goes so much faster, about 3 or 4 times a year, in relativity to us, it seems to be going backwards.
Okay.
So
because we're passing it, because it's passing us, right?
Yeah, and so it's like, since it seems to be going backwards, if you think about Mercury being he was the fast little runner and communicator and
messenger of the gods. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when you think about that, anything to do with communications during the retrograde period goes kaflooey. It's not the time to sign contracts. It's not the time to make agreements. It is the time, if you lost something in last retrograde, you might find it in this retrograde.
Your notes from junior high might reappear next time.
Really? Yeah, that's right. Because I was looking for something earlier.
You're looking for those docs. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is this would have been Thursday, I guess. My bank card disappeared. Now, my bank card, it's either in front of me at the computer because I'm doing some transaction. Oh, Margaret just left us. See, we're talking Mercury retrograde. She'll be back. But either my card is usually either in front of me at the computer or it's in my wallet. I just don't dance around the house with it. And when I am at a store, I stand there with my purse open until they hand me back my receipt and my card and I put it back in. Well, there she is. And yeah.
Okay, here I'm still I'm Mercury. I'm living in the fly tail of Mercury.
Right yeah. And so I don't know what happened to it. I cannot find it anywhere. And so I even called. I had been to a store like the week before, and it was the last time I could think of that I actually used it in a store. Right. And they said, we don't find it, but if we do, we'll let you know. Nobody's used it, thank God. You got to have the pin for it, so that helps. So I wrote off for a new one, and they canceled the old one, which meant, of course, all my bills are due on the first, and the stuff that's auto drafted out is like kicking back, and I'm going, boing, boing, boing. So it's just so frustrating.
So we have a new visitor who has checked in, Angela Kreitzer or Kritzer, don't know. Good evening, Angela. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, Mercury retrograde is being a little bit nuts. So forgive us, especially me, if I bounce off and bounce back on all the way through the show. My internet's been, Mercury has been retrograding all day.
Yeah. So that's why I thought I'd mention it because of that. Yeah.
Yeah, we are having tech difficulties because on this end, on my end, Iris and I live about 3 hours apart, so her system is different from mine.
Yeah. So I'm gonna run our crawler across real quick.
If you are a new person to our show, please visit our YouTube or Facebook and check out our first episode for our credentials. When we call that episode the prequel, and you can learn about our background, about why we do this and where it's coming from that we have these opinions. And
why do our opinions matter?
Yeah, why we think our opinions matter enough to put them on the air. And check that out. But at the same token, we also want to say welcome back and thank you to our regulars who are here as well with us. And warm welcomes to newcomers. We're glad you're here on our channel. Please feel free to ask us questions as we go. Make comments in the chat room. People on Facebook, you won't be able to see the YouTube comments, so we try to post them when it comes up in conversation. And the reverse is true too. People on YouTube don't see Facebook comments, so we try to keep you guys in the know with that lovely running banner that Iris is controlling for us.
Woo! Do the magic, cool. The buttons. I might totally zone out and not know what you're saying, but I'm trying to get it up there. So,
yay! All right, so it's that Angela. Hi, Angela.
Yes.
I thought you were somebody different. Very good.
Now, which one did you say first? She said her first one was right. Did you say
Kreitzer?
Kreitzer? Yeah.
I said, yeah, so. Kreitzer was, I have a lot of German family, so that looks like Kreitzer to me.
So I guess, first of all, for tonight's program, our theme is it's like I don't have it right in front of me. Let me see. It is I know what it is, but I'm trying to find the thing so I can read it. Golly. Okay, Mercury. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
I know the video's live now. Okay. Dark origins of fairy tales and nursery rhymes. Stories written thousands of years ago. Yes, I wrote and you heard correctly. Thousands of years ago. Are twisted, turned, and changed. How does Disney and Hollywood affect our perception? And where else might that apply in our lives? So that's what we're going with. One thing I want to just kind of kick off with, I've got my funnies. Um, this came to mind when I was putting the visuals together, and it's from Sex and the City, and Carrie Bradshaw is babysitting for her friend's young daughter, and I just thought it was so
It's
classic.
That's a comment on the pervasiveness of folklore and fairy tales, even in modern times.
Yeah, so let's see what she says. It's short.
It's cool.
And Cinderella and the prince lived happily ever after. You know that this is just a fairy tale, right, sweetheart? And things don't always happen like this in real life. I just think you should know that now.
Again.
And another one bites the dust.
So, and we lost Margot in the process. Yeah, so typical of how much information goes out through fairy tales that people, are looking for their Prince Charming forever and whatever, and then how much we've tried to counter that, especially I'd say in the last 40 years or so, to say, no, this isn't reality. And there was a story. I remember I did a women's study class when I was working on my English degree, and the in the women's study class we had to read The Paper Bag Princess, which is this whole thing about this girl who her prince gets captured by the dragon. So she goes in to save him, and her dress gets burned, and she puts a paper bag on instead, and she gets all dirty and mussy and all that, slaying the dragon. And then when she gets him and breaks him out of his confinement, he's like, God, you're a mess. Where's your dress? And she's
why aren't you pretty?
Yeah, and pretty much she says, screw you, and she walks off. So,
The Paper Bag Princess, I get it now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good little story.
I thought you were going to go down the road of alcoholism. Okay. More than one kind of paper bag rolling around in those princesses.
As I ring my beer bell.
Girl.
Oh my God, yeah. So where we're going with the fairy tales is historic. And this is the most famous man in the world, with the beer. And I don't always read fairy tales to my kids, but when I do, I tell them the original ones, which scar them for life.
And they will, and they do.
And
Iris and I have been doing research on the origin of 5 of the most popular stories. Iris, keep going. Yeah.
Well, what's interesting is when you look at Grimm, the brothers Grimm were studying culture and language,
right?
And sort of like anthropology, but they were studying the history of these stories and how they reflected. A lot of people would take the stories that were told through the years and turn it into literature.
Right.
And the brothers Grimm said, we want to go back and find the original stories and write them as they were told, because the language tells so much and not just
Nuance.
what was told, but how it was told.
How it was told, right?
And they ended up creating like 2 volumes and over 500 stories or something like that. And I don't have the exact numbers, but and they gathered these stories. And some critic said, these are horrible stories to tell children. And they go, they're not written for children. And so they ended up in the next edition putting a disclaimer in their introduction. This may not be like our version of the PG-13 type. This may not be suitable for all audiences.
Yeah, you might want to turn the page on that one. Not appropriate for all ages.
Yeah.
No. I mean, some of the stories we didn't even touch on, that, like, we didn't even talk about lullabies. You and I only talked about a little bit about fairy tales, and I found out there's a lot of mythology attached to that, of course. But lullabies. Let's talk about Rockabye Baby. What's the next line?
Kids falling from the trees.
Rockabye Baby in the treetops. When the wind blows, the cradle will rock. When the bough, which is the limb, breaks, the cradle will fall and down will come baby. Cradle and all. And that's supposed to put the child to sleep. Yeah,
permanently. Baby, yeah. Well, and then think about like the Ring Around the Rosie. That's the plague. Yeah.
About people dying and being thrown, into pits and on the meat wagon to be dragged away as dead body corpses every night. Yeah.
Ashes,
we all fall down. Rosies.
Burn, baby, burn.
Burn. Absolutely. It goes on. What's the dealio with the spoon? I don't know if it's morbid or not, but the cow jumping over the moon, the dish ran away with the spoon.
It's like guys who was smoking opium when they wrote that.
Right, exactly. I was going to say, somebody's hitting the opium, throwing out the prehistoric LSD here, and making it childhood worthy, babyhood worthy poetry about some weird shit. Now, I mean, if you want to go forward in history and talk about Alice in Wonderland and so on, yes, we know that he was running off of laudanum and morphine and cocaine and stuff like that when he wrote those books. But we're talking about how many
cats do you see in stories smoking hookahs,
Yeah, or the giant worms doing that. The cats that disappear with their mouth shut.
That's right.
And little girls that shrink, grow, and shrink, and grow, and shrink, and fight with playing cards that have faces and legs. And rabbits, and white rabbits that tell you things. Yeah. Let's go there. Or let's not. So what I'm saying is there's already, by the time this came around, Lewis Carroll, we're talking about the author of those books is Lewis Carroll. By the time he was writing his stuff and it was getting popular, it was vogue for these children's authors to be writing about macabre.
Uh-oh, she froze. No! Mercury's in retrograde. I'm going to have to find a Mercury picture and replace it every time she freezes. While we're waiting on her to come back, oh, come on, Margot. All right, let me hide her. She'll come back. I'm going to show y'all this. Everybody will appreciate this. What's the difference between a northern fairy tale and a southern fairy tale? A northern fairy tale begins once upon a time. A southern fairy tale begins, y'all ain't gonna believe this. Okay.
Don't believe this.
Yeah.
Okay. Cupkey. Yay.
Lisa asks,
and Lisa says,
how about the child's prayer? Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake. Yeah, that's going to
I
give you
pray the
nice
Lord to take
dreams.
it. Should I die before I pray the Lord this is my soul to take? Hey, you can go with next level on that. Which Lord are you talking to? Christians assume you're talking about the Christian God Lord. Guess what? Lord is also a title for a different God, also known as Satan. People refer to that one as Lord too.
Dark Lord.
Dark Lord is another reference. So,
Or,
lay myself to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. Which Lord are you talking to, baby?
and it doesn't have to be metaphysical. There were lords of the house.
And now we're going to get into, I think you're heading down the road of maybe 1300s when food was scarce. And the Great Famine came right after the mini ice age that befell most of Europe and Northern Europe, starting with England and further, what is that, east, west, east, going east. Food became...
England going east is the ocean.
Yep, and then beyond that, France.
France is south.
No, you're right.
France is southwest.
I'm thinking about the channel between England and France.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, the cliffs of Dover and all that good stuff. So anyway,
yeah, okay.
Great famine that wiped out millions of people in the 1300s, which led to cannibalism at the time. Long story short, we did the research. Guess what was on the menu? The people who couldn't fight back, and there were two types that couldn't fight back. Iris, you want to tell them?
Little ones.
Mm-hmm. They can't run as fast. Children.
And old people. Or dead people.
Dead people.
Dead people, yeah.
Dead people can't run at all. So, yes, there's records of that. Cannibalism happened of people eating children because they also saw them as replaceable. They're trying to be practical. They're starving to death. And they were also eating dead people. They were opening graves and pulling people out and eating what was still inside of their skull because the bone was protecting it. Now, I'm getting really morbid and I'm trying to be very matter of fact about this. So, fairy tales came out of this, as Iris was telling us a second ago, as a historical documentation. This was word of mouth. This is how people talked about their history as they understood it, and those became stories.
I think too, it helps also, like one of the things I found was in the German culture, people verified the stories because of where they came from. It was rustic simplicity. And a lot of the stories are deeply rooted in the forest, which was dark and dangerous. And so they used the stories as like a warning to, a lot of them use the story as a warning to people or children or whatever, don't go in the dark forest, you'll get lost or whatever. And this is what happens. And, but then there's other things that happen that put truth behind it too.
Absolutely. So. Angela was in the comments and chat on Facebook. She's talking about what that famine, the mini ice age, was probably caused by. And in 1315, she was talking about a volcano eruption that interfered and put a ton of ash into the atmosphere, which made everything cold because no sunlight could get through, and therefore a mini ice age. And then she changed it to no, it was New Zealand, not Ireland volcano. And honestly, I don't think it was either one of those. I think it was Greenland, because I don't think there might have been active volcanoes in Ireland. I don't know about New Zealand, but I knew it was near England. If somebody wants to look it up, that's fine. But I'm pretty sure it was either Iceland or Greenland. Giant volcano went off and created ash all over the world.
There is one in New Zealand.
Yeah, there was. It's possible that
There
they
was a
happened
great
at the
flood and famine in the historic UK.
1300s.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
That
probably part of
1314.
it.
Everybody was just fucked in 1300s, I
Yeah, they
guess.
were. Yeah, they were.
Um,
And the eruption went on for years and years. And from Angela's notes in Facebook, which makes sense because that's what it would take to get that much ash all over the world to block out sun, to drop the temperature. Yeah, globally,
well,
enough to kill people.
and part of the volcano was in New Zealand. The Great Flood and Famine of 1314 in Great Britain was it rained almost constantly throughout the summer and autumn, and then through most of 1315 and 1316, and crops rotted in the ground, harvest failed, livestock drowned or starved, food stocks depleted, and the price of food soared. It claimed over 5% of the British population, making everything expensive. By 1316, there were even rumors of cannibalism, and their misery and starvation. Many people begged, stole, murdered for what food they could find.
Yeah.
Families who could no longer feed their families abandoned children to fend for themselves or ate them, I guess.
Yes, they did. They had a tendency to abandon them or hide them and eat them. Mount Tarawera in New Zealand, according to Angela's getting her research on Facebook. She's doing good. They're guessing, but they think that was the Tarawera, Mount Tarawera in New Zealand.
And that's why it was the end of the Dark Ages.
It got darker.
Or no, at the beginning it was the end. I guess because things got better. I don't know.
That would be more research. What happened when the eruption started? Because very naturally, the Earth's going to start doing its equilibrium thing and start clearing up. But they can see in the ice layers, when they do ice cores, you can see how there's ash everywhere in some of those centuries, in some of those decades.
Ashes. We all fall
down.
So you want my Little Red Riding Hood thing?
Yes, give us an intro and then launch. Yes.
So
what the fuck happened last night?
Yeah, the picture's the wolf with the bonnet on, and Little Red's looking at him going, what the fuck happened last night? And so Margaret's going to tell us.
Absolutely. There's lots of different versions to the origins of Little Red Riding Hood, but the modern version is very different from the stories of origin or even the next couple of evolutions that came out of it. This one is also attributed to Germanic cultures. However, variations of the story do exist in other cultures around the world historically. In every single one of them, the little girl, Red Riding Hood, is understood to be, and this is important, only about 6 or 7 years old. In the story, she goes to see her grandmother and encounters a wolf or sometimes 2 wolves at different times. And the wolf finds out about the grandmother, beats her there, and in some variations, the wolf eats the grandmother. In other variation, he eats part of her and puts a hunk of grainy meat in the larder and somehow pours part of her blood into a bottle as a wine bottle. Okay, so now there's red wine that's actually grandma's blood in the larder too. And then he gets in grandma's bed, or in some variations, he hides in a dark corner. And when the little girl comes, every single time, all the way across all variations, except for in the modern variation, the first thing he does is tell the little girl to take off all her clothes and get in bed with him. Every time. Some variations say, he says, take off your clothes and throw them in the fire because you'll never need them again.
That's ominous.
That's very ominous. Other variations, she climbs in bed, the story stops, and the next line is the next morning. and he eats her, devours her. Chom, chom, chom. Other variations are a little bit more sexually explicit, and sex is implied between the wolf and the little girl. At one point, the little girl realizes that the wolf is not her grandmother. Since when was it normal to climb in bed naked with grandma? Just sidebar, just saying. Anyway, she realizes and she wants to escape. She tells the wolf that she has to go to the bathroom. She needs to get up to go to the bathroom. And the wolf tells her, no, just go ahead and pee in the bed. So we had a long discussion about, what did you say, Iris, about?
I was just, what came to what came to my mind, aside from golden showers? They're really twisted.
Right.
But aside from that was territorial markings, and how that can be, maybe there's some sort of tie with that. So don't know. I mean, it wasn't a wolf, but it could be a way of him marking his territory with being her or something. And we lost Margot again. So yeah, pretty gruesome. Oh, there she is. Wait a minute. No, I was. It was a good place for you to be coming back. So, yeah, it could be territorial. It could be, or something tied in with that, or marking her as territory.
Marking, all that symbolism that comes in there.
And there was somewhere, I remember when we were discussing this earlier in the week, I remember reading something that said that there's actually phrases now where they talk, where like referring to going to bed, sleeping with somebody is like getting
losing your virginity. Yeah, women losing their virginity. The French expression for that translated means she has seen the wolf. And that's the French slang for commenting on somebody no longer being a virgin. She has seen the wolf. And it ties back into...
Did anybody else see Porky's back in the day?
Oh, I forgot. That's right. Porky's reference. Yet another fable from
was up in the rafters.
Wow, that's that's right. That's a blast from the past. All right. So Little Red Riding Hood is rife with eating, cannibalism, and obviously abusing children, which led me to checking out the story of Hansel and Gretel. Classically, two little children that get lost in the woods and get found by a nefarious person. And the little boy, in modern times, the little boy is set up to be fattened for consumption, cannibalism. And his sister finds a way to help set him free. In the older versions, again, the parents are bereft of responsibility. And in the original versions, the dad or the evil mother or the evil stepmother or a witch who has bewitched the dad makes the dad abandon the two children again in the dangerous forest where bad things live and you should never go, and the children get lost there. In some stories, it's a witch, which is more like the modern version. It's a witch that finds them. In other stories, it's the devil. In other stories, it's the devil and his wife. In other stories, it's an ogre. In another story, it's an ogress, a female ogre. In all of those stories, sometimes they eat the boy and the girl. Sometimes they eat just the boy. But most of the time, and another variation, they escape the witch or the devil, come back home, and stepmother makes the daughter kill and cook her brother, makes Gretel kill and cook Hansel for the family to eat. So, yes, in every variation, the daughter, the sister is made to kill the brother, and she never eats him. When she does cook him or kill him, she kills him or cooks him for someone else. And there's some spiritual elements about she takes his bones and his heart and buries them under a tree, and the tree talks and becomes her brother, and he says, I'm saved, and blah, blah, blah. However, he's still vindictive of his sister for killing him, even though she doesn't eat him. It's weird. It gets weirder and weirder and weirder. So my point being, this is another really popular story about abusing the snot out of kids and even eating them. And this is such a common theme. This is such a culturally inherited theme since at least the 1300s that it has survived even into modern culture without being acknowledged for the bizarre morbidity that it is, or that I perceive it to be. Okay, let's be more specific. That I perceive it to be, and apparently a lot of other people might too. So these weren't the only other two stories there were that had this morbidity craziness in it. Iris, we both picked out some stories. Let's hear about the dark origins of what you researched.
Well, one of the ones that I researched was Cinderella, and what there was a number of different sources, and some say that the story goes back at least 2,000 years. The first recorded story featuring a Cinderella-like figure dates back in Greece in the 6th century, and in that story, this Greek courtesan has one of her shoes stolen by an eagle, who flies it across the Mediterranean and drops it in the lap of an Egyptian king. He takes the shoe drop as a sign from the heavens, both literally and metaphorically. And the king goes on a quest to find the owner of the shoe, and then he marries her and lifts her from her lowly status to the throne. And then in total, there's like more than 500 versions of the Cinderella story. But one is, but they're all a little bit darker than the one that we're used to seeing, where the birds are flying in and helping Cinderella and all that stuff.
Magic mice and magic pumpkins.
Yeah, exactly. The French were the ones that introduced the glass slipper and the pumpkin and the fairy godmother, minus the bibbidi bobbidi boo. That was Disney. But in the Brothers Grimm, Cinderella, in the story that the Brothers Grimm originally found and published, Cinderella would go out by a tree that was growing on her mother's grave and would cry at the tree all the time, which her tears would water the tree. And then what happened was doves started like nesting in the tree, and I think we lost Margot again. Oh, okay. Doves would nest in the tree and like come to her, and so that was where that nature thing came into play with her connection with nature. And then when she would, and it was like the ball went on for like 3 nights in a row, and she, like, the first night, well, she goes out to the tree and she says some words, asks for a dress, and it's like the tree magically produces this dress for her that has gold and silver in it and some little silver slippers. And she goes to the ball and meets the prince. He dances with her. She leaves. Then the next night, same thing, but a better dress. And the third night, an even better dress. But then as she is leaving, the prince set a trap for her by putting
peanut butter
on this. Yeah. Basically, it was like tar, but it wasn't tar. Pine, that pine sticky stuff. on the
Pine sap. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when she was leaving, one of her shoes stuck, and then he goes
Resin.
around. Yeah,
Right.
and he goes around he takes the shoe, and okay, now I'm going to find her.
Right.
Of course, what I love about this, and I'll finish that in just a minute. What I love is this, because this crossed my mind. It shows Cinderella running off with the slipper staying on the stairs. And in our current versions, the clothes at midnight, she went back to her tattered clothing. How come the glass slipper survived? We don't know. But in the and
the shoe did not disappear. Everything else did. Right.
Yeah. But in the Brothers Grimm version,
Fairy tale.
I know, but hey. But in the Brothers Grimm version, when the prince comes and he, first of all, they can't, Cinderella's nowhere to be found. They and she had her stepmother and stepsisters, they had like been selling stuff off and all that, and she got her name because she slept by the fireplace because she didn't have a bed and that kind of thing. Okay.
Yeah.
But when they couldn't find her, the stepsisters wanted to try on the shoes, and one of them took the shoe into her bedroom and cut her big toe off so her fat foot would fit in the shoe. And the prince was like, "Oh, you must be the one for me." And then saw the shoe was filling with blood and kind of said, "What's up?" What, WTF?
It's a glass shoe. You can see the blood.
Well, this was a different slipper. This one wasn't in this story.
Oh, it was just a slipper filling up with blood. Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of, you kind of ruined it. Well, then the second,
your sister said something really good.
"Oh no, that's my shoe," and her heel was too big, so she chopped off part of her heel to make it fit. And then he's like, "Oh, you must be the one." Like he didn't think that this could happen again. And then he sees it, all the blood again, and no, I guess not. And then Cinderella appears, and he tries it on her, and off they go, and they, and they get married. Let's see what
Deborah brought up one we hadn't thought of yet. Bounce that one up on the screen if you don't mind. Roald Dahl, popular children's author from our time, consistently portrayed child abuse in his stories, such as Matilda, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Holes, Witches, and more. And more.
For sure.
Roald Dahl was majorly, let me just go ahead and swear about it, he was majorly fucked up. He's like Edgar Allan Poe and he's like Edgar Allan Poe and Grimm and Mark Twain. He's also brilliant. Roald Dahl was also brilliant, all rolled into one. He was really twisted. He was an international spy for the U.S. government in Europe during World War II.
I didn't know that.
He was, yep. And he was a keen observer of the human condition and behaviorism, which made him an excellent spy for garnering information out of the ladies. Except for he was too good at it, and they exhausted him, and he finally begged to be let out of Europe and sent home because he was tired of having to jump in the sack every night. They were passing him around.
I'm a whore for the government. in a manly way.
The trooper took a few for the team. I'm telling you, the poor baby. Yeah. But in his retirement, that was his download. He did. Didn't he also do? I'm not sure. James and the Giant Peach. Did he do Nightmare Before Christmas?
No, that was
somebody else. It was similar, but not that one.
Yeah, and I think he did Stuart Little, didn't he?
He did all kinds of weird shit, but yes, he did a lot of focus on abused children. And when you look behind the abused children stories, that's when you start seeing even more profound morbidity, such as cannibalism.
Yeah.
And alternative religious beliefs that are based in negativity. Let's just call it that.
Yeah. But Cinderella
freezes up again.
Yeah, and Cinderella's whole deal was Oh, sorry. There she goes. Um, I'm trying to find because I took a bunch of notes and trying to get this straight. And I'm trying to watch for Margot too. So give me just a second. Okay. No, she might be on the other end. Okay. Um, Cinderella was considered. It's considered a story about the class warfare because you're back. Um, yeah, but it was all about class warfare, and because her originally, her father was wealthy. That he
Fell from grace.
remarries. In fact, in some stories, they say that she and there's some variations of the story that said that she. Now I might get my stories mixed up.
What was the other story that you looked at?
Snow White. So they're very
Oh, both
similar.
yeah, they're very similar, which is why we put them together.
Yeah,
They're
and now
both
I'm getting
stories
mixed
about
up.
classicism.
But there's one of those stories where the daughter, it was her real mother was, and I think Snow White in some
That's Snow White.
variations,
Her
it's
real
her real
mother
mother. It's not a stepmother. And
is
then I think
evil.
it was in the
Right.
Cinderella, the dad, the mother died, the dad remarried, and she killed the stepmother so that he would marry the housekeeper. Go figure.
Holy cow. So yeah, that's right. The abandonment. Abandonment is the other big issue besides cannibalism and abuse, which ties back into the Roald Dahl stuff like Matilda,
Yeah.
Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. That's all neglect and abandonment right there. Yeah.
But well, I don't know. Charlie and Chocolate Factory, he had all his grandparents in one bed. That was
He
strange.
was severely neglected by his parents.
Well, true. Yeah, he didn't have anybody. He was having to take on the role of raising
Iris,
money and.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you have one child and 4 parents, who are you gonna take care of?
Mm-hmm.
The child. So, but his family didn't.
Yeah, exactly.
and
But
in society abandoned the whole family too. They were destitute, without help, without a real job, blah blah blah. So the abandonment issue is still there, which Willy Wonka also had too. He also had abandonment issues.
But in Cinderella's story, I found the version of Grimm was followed very closely by the version done with Drew Barrymore,
Yes.
Ever After.
Yes.
It's a very close correlation because the stepmom and the sisters, they're selling off all her worldly goods, the things that her father left her, and furniture's disappearing and all that, and so that was an interesting parallel. But
the story
it's
was
all about
political sparring.
She started out rich, fell, and then trying to climb her way back up.
Right.
But of course, you have a man rescuing her, and the same thing with Snow White. Although with Snow White stories, they were all the variations talk about dwarves, but it was actually the mines that were in. I think it was out of Romania or Germany. Is generally where the setting is considered where the stories came from.
Yeah.
They put children in the mines, and as a result, they would end up with deformities,
right,
and injured limbs and things like that, and so they would look,
like
older
and like trolls and right, distorted, right,
and but again, and then there was one of the variations that I read about. There was a true story behind it where the king had given his wife a mirror that actually had a contraption on it that would mimic her voice, and when she talked to it, it was like some type of ancient recording device or something, but not
Ancient
Well,
technology, right.
yeah, and just really
That
interesting.
explains why 7 dwarves, 7 little men, would be interested in the mothering skills and affectations of Snow White rather than trying to necessarily have sex with her.
Yeah,
They were
yeah.
they were interested in being cuddled and fed and tucked into bed, and they wanted her to sing to them and do their laundry and tell them that they were good boys. And now we're talking about Peter Pan.
Yeah. Yeah, how often does a man actually rescue a woman from the woes of life? I'm also not referring to acute emergent situations like in police department, fire department, and EMS. Yeah, and that's true, and that's kind of what in the beginning when I shared the video from Sex in the City where Carrie is telling the girls, you know, this is just a fairy tale. This stuff doesn't happen in real life, and of course, then the kid goes again, and it's like, oh well, another one bites the dust. Yeah, because we don't have the glory of being rescued. Although, believe you me, there's been times in my life where I'm like, I'm just so tired of taking care of everybody else when it's my turn.
But you know what? Men feel the same way. So humans feel the same way. You know, they wish somebody would come along and make life easier for them, whatever that looks like to them. And so, yeah, it makes sense that these stories have that part of that foundation in them too, that desire to be rescued and life be made easier. Yeah.
And in that theme, I found this. It was about the Little Mermaid and how women often suffer at the hands of men and will do more than they should. In the original Little Mermaid novel, the mermaid's legs constantly feel as if she's walking on sharp knives. The prince likes to watch her dance, which she does for him despite excruciating pain. Then he marries someone else and the mermaid kills herself. Oh my God.
You
That's
notice
my life. How much pain have I gone through for you, you little son of a bitch? Now what am I?
I thought for sure that story was going to go about shaving legs or something with the knives and the hair and the legs. And I'm like, okay. I was like, all right, that's just a little too weird. Now look, I'm seeing, and the last story I did, which wasn't as horrible as I thought it would be, Rumpelstiltskin. Mm-hmm. The story Rumpelstiltskin comes from tons and tons of cultures. It even has its own fairy tale classification of being the Find My Secret Name. Almost all cultures have some kind of little monster guy who rescues a lady who spins gold or hay or yarn or dreams or spider webs or something. He rescues her, and in exchange, she has to guess his name or die or give over her baby. Why the hell would a little tiny monster want a baby except to... Okay.
Snack time.
So, yeah, at least. All right. So, some kind of human trafficking. So, the Rapunzel one, that's about as morbid as it got, is the implication of why would a little single trolley man want a human baby to itself? That's about as weird as it gets everywhere. So, what I really want to point out is a theme, Iris, that you're running on. Oh, another version, she turns into sea foam when he rejects her, or something along those lines. Yeah, that's dying. Yeah, you can see that repeatedly in historical poetry. When instead of ashes to ashes, soldiers and people of the sea become foam. They become bones to foam instead of ashes to ashes. Instead of ashes, dust to ashes.
Or they're really rabid.
Oh, that was some style.
There's a whole new meaning to foaming at the mouth. And we're back to the wolf. Oh no, I messed her up. She's frozen again. This is it. She's living out the fairy tale Frozen. you know, she freezes up and she disappears. Uh, so yeah.
All right. So what I was talking about, if you don't mind, is I wanted to sort of bring it back around to something that you're pointing out very well, Iris, in that there is a whole bunch of woe is me, the poor, pitiful, victimized female that needs to be rescued. Her life is, subpar, it's substandard, and somebody has to come rescue her or make it worse. Somebody comes along and makes it worse. An evil king, an evil witch, the devil, a daddy, a mommy, abandonments, or your sister, or your brother, something, a dwarves. Somebody comes along and makes it worse. So you're suffering and somebody makes it worse. And then a male has to come along, or some kind of authority figure has to come along, usually male, to make your life better. They never illustrate what the better life is, though. That's always where the story stops.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is in this day and age of fear porn, which happens a lot, the news is constantly telling us to be terrified, constantly telling us about scary medical stuff, constantly telling us about toll counts, and the numbers are not adding up, especially when you go back over time through the last year and a half. So the point is why do this? It's fear porn. Well, what existed before television? Books and radio. What existed before books and radio? Verbal storytelling. And what are we talking about? The stories that started 700, 4,000, 2,000 years ago. This theme of keeping people, especially women, victimized and downtrodden due to fear or abandonment or the reinforcement of the weaker sex, all right, the more delicate gender. Can we see that that has been reinforced in our Western culture? Got to say Western, because that doesn't happen as much in Eastern folklore, although it's not impossible. It does show up. It's just not as frequent. But in Western folklore, this fear porn, especially for women, is very, very pervasive, to the point that we don't even see it as unusual. That Cinderella needs rescuing, Snow White needs rescuing, Little Mermaid needs rescuing, Moana, a slight exception, needed some rescuing. She couldn't go do it by herself. She had to have Dwayne Johnson show up as Maui, the god, to come help her do it. However, he had to get helped by a female god who came out of the mountain, blah, 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 blah. So there's a little back and forth. But that's a sign of the times, female power empowerment a little bit more. So, which brings me down next level, which brings me to the thought of, why is there so much hyper focus on disempowering females? Little boys and little girls all grow up and they all have the same kind of feelings and human process in our cultures. Why is there a hyper focus on just the girls? Well, the girls grow up to be mommies. The primary caretaker, the primary psychological shapers are the mothers. Historically, men went out in the field. They went hunting. They were out of the house. The women did the childbearing. The women did the child rearing, because the fathers were out bringing in sustenance for the family to survive, for his offspring to.
Oh man, she froze up again. And I can pick that up. They were also, women were tasked with multiplying the population, because inevitably, children would die, so you'd have big families, and often you needed big families to help take care of the business or the crops or whatever. So when you think of it that way, women's jobs were in essence to have children. There she comes.
I heard to have children.
Yeah, that was their primary job, was to have children. I kind of picked up where you left off, where
Yeah.
women were tasked with having the children, and you had large families for tending the farm, business, if, mortality rates, that sort of thing.
Right. So they were targeted. The females as children and the females as mothers were targeted. And that would mess with the boys too, because the abandonment issues and being eaten, yeah, that'll still mess with your head, male or female. So it's real interesting to watch in literature how long we have been lacking what you might characterize as feminine divine, lacking that influence from feminine divine, that the patriarchal influence is skewed in literature. I'm not saying that that's true across the board. I'm saying today's research that you and I did, literature, historically, since at least what we found 700, 2,000, 4,000 years ago.
Another thought that I have seen in this vein is that women were seen as so powerful in some cultures.
Yeah.
That by one way to keep them down and under control, because the men were fearful.
Women were creators. Women created life.
Yeah. And so what better way but then to beat them down with the stories and the, the psychological impact. So
quite the chess game, is it not?
Yes.
It is. Reminds me of the bigger chess game going on in the world right now. So we're running into 10:33, and we were talking, you and I were talking earlier about where are we going with these dark origins and the evolution of these fairy tales. How would you like to summarize how that could be tied into, let's call them modern fairy tales?
Well, and I think you just touched on it quite well with how the media distorts things, how and another thing is, a lot of people think, oh, well, if it's written in the history books, it must be true. And we are learning that history has been so distorted. And there's lots of things that are kept out. And some of
on
it was
purpose.
Yeah. And how, and look at things like that are being whitewashed as we speak. And they're and they're talking. I mean, I've been seeing brief news stories. You don't see a lot about it, but I've been seeing things where they're talking about putting out books in some areas that don't talk about the Nazis. They're talking about, I saw an article yesterday. I came across some news story on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you think about, how much do people really know about history in the last 40 years? There's lots of people, the people that have come along now, the millennials, don't necessarily know about the impact behind Watergate and all the little things that happened.
They don't know what the word Watergate means.
Yeah. And then, the Vietnam War. I mean, so much more has come out since the war. But when you start realizing from, and then you see what happened in World War II, nobody talks about, and there's plenty of documentation. Look it up. But George W. Bush's grandfather was a bookkeeper for Hitler, and Ford created tanks for Germany and for America, and how all these big players played both sides of the war because it's a moneymaker.
American soldiers would capture German tanks, open the hood, and there were Ford engine parts stamped all over the engines and inside of them that they knew they were made in America. Yeah, Ford was selling them to them.
But nobody talks about that, and they kind of whitewash it, and instead we're like, and how our, we honor the servicemen that go over, and women that fight and die for what they believe is a valid cause. But, we know that the Vietnam War was a lost cause. And yet, how many people did we lose in that? And it was sheerly for money and power. I'm talking about the Vietnam War, Margo, being sheerly for money
Yeah,
and
I heard
power.
that part. Yeah, how many people did we lose
Yeah.
in the name of a political war that actually had no benefit to the general American public at all, nor to
And if
even democracy worldwide? It didn't even benefit that.
and when you notice wars start dying down, there always seems to be a new reason for them to come back up. And then again, you start following the money trail. But it all gets whitewashed because the powers that be want us to think that this is for democracy and the American way. And
That war is, they're trying to normalize war, is what they're trying to do over
yeah,
time. Normalize it.
yeah,
Referring back to the historical rewrite, the number one basic fact that most people forget about how accurate is any historical report or opinion or view or video or anything, how accurate is it? The number one thing that people forget is, no matter where you do research, no matter how accurate you think it is, or research and double research and back it up and look up credentials and so on behind it, the fact remains that history is written by the victors. The people who lost are never going to be allowed to publish their side of the story. Nobody wants to read what the Nazis thought about World War II. You're not going to see it. Nobody gets to hear until, I take that back, until about the 60s or 70s, nobody got to hear what the Native Americans' opinions were, thoughts were, stories were from their side of the genocide that happened to them when the Europeans came. Those are just two examples. You're never, the people who lost and died basically aren't here to tell you their side of the story. Only the people who win are going to write their version of history. So you, unless you're there and seeing it happen, you're never going to know what really happened. This is why it's such a big deal to history is being made and you're seeing it. That's why that's such a poignant statement. We're witnessing history right now, political history, international history, spiritual history, and we're here, we're actually seeing it instead of reading about it from one perspective in a history book.
Well, and how many of us, I mean, and this is, which is your information is very, very important, but just on a trivial side,
sure.
How many people think that Columbus was sailing around the world to prove that it was round? And they already had globes back then, But
he was a mercenary and a fortune hunter, and he was just looking for more resources to steal and take back to Europe. He was nothing but a mercenary and a merchant. That's all he was. Yeah. He wasn't circumventing the world. Bullshit.
Yeah, and so we're just constantly fed these little tidbits, or there was another fact in there that, I mean, Robert Wool, I think it's Wuhl, I think is how you pronounce his name. He did a great thing on History 101 for HBO, and if you look it up, sometimes you can find it on YouTube or whatever. And it's a hysterical, like 30-minute to an hour little show, and he did two of them. And like one of them, he talked about Paul Revere, and the only reason Paul Revere became popular was because Washington Irving wrote the poem about him because it rhymed. The guy who really did like the 300-mile ride, Paul Revere rode about 20 miles. The guy who did like the 300-mile ride, his name was Oh God.
Now that you
Named
need to
after
say
a
it.
vacuum. It's not. I mean, a
Who,
vacuum's named after him. I should say.
not Hoover. Not
No, it begins with an I. It's
if anybody.
it's
I heard a variation of that.
Bissell, or something Bissell, Irving Bissell, or something like
Something
that.
like that.
And he said,
Also
what
heard
rounds?
a young girl was a part of that sequence of riders too,
Probably.
and that she picked. She was 12 years old, and that the ride had broken down, and her dad was supposed to do it. He couldn't. He was sick. He broke his leg or whatever, and she jumped up in the middle of the night and rode to the next town with the message.
That's cool.
And
I hadn't heard
she's
that.
attributed with saving that signal.
Girl
Yeah.
power.
Yeah.
And but Paul Revere, listen to my children, and you shall hear the Midnight Rider, Paul Revere. And the only reason Pierce won the presidential campaign was because Hawthorne wrote a book about him, and that was the way of spreading stories and propaganda. Pierce was actually Barbara Bush's like great grandfather or something, way
These
back.
people are all descendants of each other. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was just crazy. And I think he was the one that also bet the White House China and lost it. He was a gambler. He was pretty lousy.
Woo! Yeah, some people are. Yeah. The gambling god is not your friend.
Yeah. But anyway, so little trivial things to the big stuff.
Guess who I'm a descendant of? John Quincy Adams.
Ooh.
Yeah. He's like a great uncle.
My only connection is I know the makeup artist for the Adams series of.
I like that even better. Angelica Houston is one of my heroes.
Oh yeah,
I look up to her. She is so. I love her. Morticia Adams is just the coolest.
Perfect. Yes.
But and that still ties in. That is satire on these dark fairy tales. The Addams Family is modern satire about the dark shit that's been around for thousands of years.
I'll be the victim all your life.
Wednesday Addams at Maka or whatever it was.
Yes.
Oh my God, that child had her and her mother had the best lines all the way through the movie.
Oh, there she goes again. Well, folks, hopefully she'll come right back. Wait a minute. Oh, here we go. No, I'm trying to show her in the screen. But we do need to wrap it up because we know it's late. So, Margot, do you want to share any closing words? Because we really should wrap it up. It's 10:45.
Yeah, absolutely. Do the research, folks. If the stories that shape our culture and shape our self-awareness, shape our values, if those stories have been changed and evolved for thousands of years and we can actually document that, you're welcome, Jen Bradley.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And if this is a normal part of human sociology for thousands of years, you're damn straight that habit and that practice has not stopped. What we think we know, what is shaping our values, what is moving us through time, and how we communicate with each other, what we value, what we don't value, what we think is a fact, what we think is normal, what we think is truth. And we'll talk about that more next week.
Because it's liar, liar, pants on fire next week.
What we think is true and not true is changing.
Yes.
Feel free to do the research because the stories we're being told in modern time, and I do mean media, television, movies, Hollywood, is still a fairy tale. With that, namaste, Miss Ivory.
Thank you for joining us.
We love you. Namaste.
Thank you for joining The Eyes of Indigo with Iris Carter and Margot Ross Sears. Music is Arcadia by Kevin MacLeod of Incomptech.com, licensed under Creative Commons. Visit our Facebook page for broadcast details, www.facebook.com/EyesOfIndigo. Show is copyrighted 2021 by Iris Carter and Margot Ross Sears.